Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's episode is an interview with Garrett Philbin, the owner of Be Awesome, Not Broke, a financial coaching business that works entirely virtually with clients. Garrett has had an awesome career path because it had nothing to do with financial planning. He's actually from the music business and made a career switch into planning because of the need he saw for financial coaching. You'll notice I say coaching, not planning, because he's actually not a CFP and doesn't have an RIA. He doesn't do comprehensive financial planning and completely steers clear of investment management. Garrett is building his business working with clients on what I would call level 1 financial planning, which is extremely valuable. He's also building his business off referrals from other financial advisors, most of all of which are in XYPN, working with the clients that aren't yet ready for their comprehensive financial planning services, and they're referring those folks over to Garrett. His main area of focus is in cash flow and debt management and just overall getting your financial house in order. And when you're done with his services, you'll be ready to hire a financial planner that offers more comprehensive services. I absolutely love his business model and think it's something that we need a lot more of because there are so many people out there that would benefit from working with a financial coach. So if this is of interest to you, definitely listen to this entire episode. You can find all of the resources we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/60. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. You can interact with other listeners, ask guest questions, and more. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Garrett. Hey, Garrett, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, Alan.
So we are very lucky to have gotten you scheduled because you actually had emailed me just a couple days before I had emailed you regarding this. So tell listeners about your exciting upcoming trip.
So in 2 days from now, I'm going to be headed on a road trip around the western part of the U.S. I'm actually in my hometown of San Luis Obispo, California right now. Over the next 7 weeks, going to be going up north of California, then Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana. You'll no longer be there, but I'll wave at where you used to be. Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and then I think maybe the top of Arizona, and then coming back, and then ultimately heading down to XYPN conference in San Diego.
I love it. So I have not actually mentioned on the show yet. So for listeners out there, what he is referring to is the fact that in 2 days' time, actually, I will be loading up into a trailer and I'm making the move from Bozeman, Montana down to Nashville, Tennessee. Going to get next to a airport that's a little bigger than our 7 gates here in Bozeman. And literally, I had an experience recently where one of the flight attendants, I was boarding with my girlfriend and she had it was a small roller bag, but it was a really small plane. She was like, will this fit? And the flight attendant looked at me or the boarding agent looked at me and said, you fly a lot. Do you know if this will fit up there? It's like, at what point the boarding agents know who you are?
It's probably time for a change then.
Yeah, I will hit diamond status this year on Delta out of a 7-gate airport, so not ideal. I'm moving to Nashville. There's the big news.
Sorry for, blowing up your spot with that one.
No, I love it. So, yeah, we have so many awesome things I want to talk about, particularly a blog post you wrote for the XY Planning Network blog that actually prompted me to reach out to you to have you on the show and some other things that you've been working on. But let's just give kind of an overview. I want to hear a little bit about kind of your career path and how you came to kind of own your own financial coaching firm. So I guess, how did you get started?
Man, this is a really circuitous path. My background is actually music business. So I am one of the career changers. That's what I went to school for. Went to the University of Miami down in Florida. And that's what for, 5 years before starting this company is what I did. So that was my life. And in the music business, I guess how it kind of relates to me starting my own financial coaching firm is I worked a lot in client services. So I was kind of the liaison between the creatives and the business people. So kind of in the firm that I've built now, it's often dealing a lot with left and right brain where it's money, but then also the emotions and the goals that people have. So I think that kind of dealing between the creative and business side in the music business gave me a way to see how to have that conversations between two groups of people. And now I simply have that with one person, but kind of the both sides of their brain and looking at money and emotions and kind of how to bring those two together.
And so was that kind of what led you to get interested in financial planning at that point?
You know, in the music business, I worked for Sony for a couple of years, which is obviously a big company, and then started two companies with a couple friends of mine from college. And that was the first taste of entrepreneurship in starting my own thing and kind of what it's like to be part of a really small team and all of the excitement, yet stress and obligations that come with wearing so many different hats. And ultimately, I realized that the music business was not the business that I wanted to be in. It is a really interesting and exciting business, but it's not very well run. There's a lot of tension in between the people that create the music and the people that exploit it, which is not a negative term. That's what it's called. You take the music and you try to make money from it. So there was just a lot of lack of trust between the people who were making the music and the people that had to make money off of it. And I didn't really like that. So ultimately, one of the businesses that we started hit a cash crunch. And so it gave me the opportunity to step back and say, okay, if the way we've been doing something isn't working, and if I'm not really sure this is what I want to be doing, let me take a step back and see what it is that I actually want to do. One of the co-founders of the company, he said, you know, you love to teach and to mentor. I actually volunteered for 2 years out of college at a high school for low-income students and really loved that experience. And that's where the teaching and mentoring side, I got to flex those muscles and realize how much I really love that. And then he's also like, dude, for some reason you nerd out and love personal finance. Like, you've helped us with it. I was doing the books and a lot of the accounting for the companies that we started. He's like, what would it look like to combine those things? And it was funny because sometimes it takes people from outside to give you perspective on what you're good at and what you actually want to focus on. And so that's when I had the chance to say, holy crap, like, why don't I look into what that is? And honestly, I had no idea of what financial planning really was. I knew what a financial advisor was, but only on like the highest level of, usually it's old rich white people helping old rich white people. And from there, but it was just once that seed of an idea of, okay, I can help people, I can teach them and mentor them around their money. Like, what would that look like? I'd never found an idea that I was so excited about that it was just like the moment he said that, went home, just multiple pages and pages and pages of Evernote on like what I could do to help people, how I could help people, what it would look like. And just realized that if I get this fired up about something that I in that moment knew so little about, like, I really need to go after this. And that's really where that seed started.
So what year was this?
This was April. So we hit the cash crunch in April of 2015.
Okay. So just over a year ago now.
Just over a year ago, correct.
So did you decide to pursue the CFP or any other type of more formal education, or was it mainly based on kind of self-taught off the internet and resources that are available?
It was a conscious decision. I did some research and saying, okay, what is the CFP? Connected with a lot of people who had their CFP and realized that while it's incredibly important for people to have if they want to do comprehensive planning, and I think that's definitely the route people should go if they want to do comprehensive planning, that actually isn't where my focus was and what I wanted to do. Where I had struggled in the past and where I saw a lot of my friends struggling and people that I knew was really around the basics of cash flow management, of budgeting, of not having a plan to pay down debt. And ultimately where it all stemmed from was not having a really good idea of what was important to them and why. So this very kind of kinder life planning, as I'm discovering, is really about when I realized that that's what I wanted to focus on. I realized that the CFP wasn't necessarily the most important thing I had to do next in order to do that.
No, I totally agree. And it's kind of interesting just how little the CFP focuses on anything related to the everyday American. And we get this question. I think we answered it in a mailbag one time. Kitsis and I did that. I don't remember what the exact question was, but I remember the answer basically being that the CFP doesn't really teach you skills when it comes to cash flow debt management. The word student loans is never mentioned in the CFP education.
Yeah.
And so we use the CFP as the gold standard. We think it's a fantastic designation, but ultimately it's not actually the best formal education for working with younger clients. And I know folks look at the AFC designation, the Accredited Financial Counselor, which I'm looking to learn more about. And I think we're going to be at their conference this year just to learn more about it, because that may be a better designation for this type of thing. I mean, have you found any other more formal designations that make sense for you in terms of kind of the work you're doing?
I've been looking into that one. There are a couple others that people have turned me on to. Honestly, at this point, it's always, as an entrepreneur, looking at what is the next most important thing I can be doing. And right now it's in the, okay, get clients, keep clients, and kind of survive this first year. And then after that, it's going to be, okay, now that I'm a little bit more on stable footing, what are some additional things I can do professionally? So for professional development. And then I think that's at the time where I'm going to be able to come up, take a breath and say, yes, I want to do some more formal programs like that. Right now, it's just reading a ton of books, talking to a bunch of people, and kind of the informal education side, but definitely understanding that that more formal education process is going to be an important step as well.
I totally agree. I remember, I was on the PhD track at the University of Georgia. And so I was getting my master's that was supposed to flow into a PhD program. And I had a situation where basically I was going to get delayed 2 years of my graduation because of some things that they did at the program that it was just going to take me longer than I had expected. And I was talking to my major professor and he asked the question, what do you really want to do? And I said, I really do just want to own my own firm. And I think the PhD is just amazing credentials. I think it's going to bring in clients. And he said it will. I mean, he's a PhD. He owned his own firm. He said the PhD will absolutely bring in more clients. Yeah. But if you and I are sitting here today and you have two paths, one is go get your PhD and it takes an additional 2 years on top of some other time. So let's say 3 to 4 years, and then you start your own firm, or you start today, start trying to bring in clients. How much better off are you going to be in the next 3 or 4 years if you basically spend that time prospecting instead of studying for your PhD? And that was when I kind of clued into exactly what you're talking about, which is like, okay, yeah, I could do something more, or I could spend the next year, actually going and getting clients. And that way, instead of having my PhD, I have 20 clients or 30 clients or whatever. Much better route as a business owner. Yeah.
And it's interesting because as I was trying to get into the profession and seeing what opportunities were out there, I started talking to Caleb Brown, for example, in New Planner Recruiting and seeing what opportunities there were for me to get experience in the industry. But the more I looked into it, I realized that, okay, I could get an associate job, or I could get something like that where I would maybe for 2 or 3 years be doing something that would kind of ancillarily be related to what I wanted to be doing. But ultimately, it would be 2 to 3 years that, I wouldn't be in the thick of it. I wouldn't be out there talking to people, prospecting or getting clients or being in front of clients. And my experience from starting those 2 companies in the music business was that you just learn by doing. And ultimately, helping people with budgeting and cash flow and finding out what is important to them and why, it's not rocket science. And I don't mean this in any way to diminish what that work is. I think it's actually harder to deal with the emotions than any of simply the numbers side. But it's not rocket science in the sense that you have to have a whole bunch of schooling that can prepare you for it. It's how do you listen well to people? Can you be an active listener? Can you tap into what is truly important to them? Can you create a safe space where they will open up to you about that? And then can you help them put together a plan, a basic cash flow, and saying, okay, here's what is important to you, and here's how we can align your values with your spending. All right, let's go work forward and do this.
Yeah, it really is. It's the art and science of financial planning. And listeners know that Kitsis and I have both pushed that, if you're fresh out of school, you're 22, go get a job in financial planning, go learn more about the industry. The CFP can only teach you so much.
Yeah.
It teaches you the science. It does not teach you the behavioral aspects, which honestly, I'm not a big, you need age and experience kind of guy, but it was even helpful for me. And I'm somebody who just likes to experiment. I would rather dive into the deep end to learn if I know how to swim. And it sounds like you're the same way.
Yeah.
But the difference is you had some other experiences in terms of running a company, some background. I find career changers have a much easier time starting their own business than folks that have zero work experience. and just, have just come out of school. But it really does come down to, it's so challenging. And I wish it wasn't the truth, but like people ask me, how can I go learn how to do financial planning for millennials? Then I have to say, you have to go start your own firm, because it's not like there's a plethora of jobs out there that will teach you the work that you're currently doing. We just don't have those opportunities currently. So hopefully at some point you're employing 5 or 6 people, and everyone in the XYPN network is employing 5 or 6 people. And I can say, hey, there's 1,000 jobs available out there to go learn, I guess, the ropes. But unfortunately, we're several years away from that. So, okay, so you decided to launch your own firm. Now, you made an interesting decision to not actually register as an RIA. So tell me about kind of the decision process there, kind of the route that you took from a business entity standpoint.
So the decision to not register for an RIA was kind of from 2 angles. One is that I had no interest in helping people with their investments. Investing in that idea was not something, just kind of when I was starting my own firm, that I wanted to focus on. I just said, okay, really the basics. This is what we're going to look at: budgeting, cash flow, what's important to you. And the more that I learned about it, and as I've been running my company, I've realized that there are some aspects where that could be helpful to have as a tool. But then also from the compliance standpoint and the registration standpoint, I just realized kind of the cost benefit analysis is, for me, if that's not where I want to be focusing on, then I simply will not do that side and I will stay away from it. And that's actually been a great way for me to have conversations with comprehensive financial planners who have started their own RIAs, start conversation of, hey, I work with people in this very limited capacity. You sometimes get people like that coming to you, prospects who are a better fit for me than for comprehensive financial planning. So how about I work with them first? You refer them to me, I work with them. And then when they get to the point of having positive cash flow, good spending habits, and they know kind of what goals they're working towards, I can then hand them back to you, and you can help them on this larger scope with estate planning, college planning, tax planning, helping them with their investments. And you can pick up where my kind of expertise ends. And so that's been a great conversation starter of this kind of back and forth referral relationship.
It reminds me of the value of like a Dave Ramsey course, what LearnVest used to be, where we kind of see, I called it level 1 planning.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that it's bad or less or anything like that. It's just building the foundation that comprehensive financial planning is built on. And we're an industry that ultimately we have generally only worked with rich people after they've made their money. We didn't do level 1 planning. We didn't help them get there. They just got there themselves and then hired us. And this is an entirely new model where we're starting to see folks like yourself kind of build out this foundation for clients, help them get their goals in line, figure out what they want out of life, figure out their spending and their cash flow, start saving money, and get to a point to where then hiring a comprehensive financial planner makes sense. And truth be told, this service actually reaches exponentially more clients than comprehensive financial planning, simply because it's very challenging. It's impossible to do real quality financial planning for someone that's an overspender. I mean, you have to start there.
Exactly. And what's interesting is I came into this world with literally zero experience and understanding and history of what I didn't know what a broker dealer was. I didn't know what an RIA was. So for me, I think what actually has been a huge asset and a benefit is not having any of this understanding of what has been or what quote unquote should be. And that allowed me to come in and say, what do I see people struggling with? And that was, I see people struggling with, especially in New York City, which is where I've lived for the past 5 years, is they spend more money than they make, or they're making a good amount of money, but they aren't spending it in a way that's making them happy. Some of them have goals, but aren't putting money towards it. Some of them have no idea what is even important to them or what their goals are. So my approach was, how do I help people who are around me? As you said, there's so many more people who need that kind of help. What can I create that will specifically address those needs that I'm seeing of the people around me? And that was this mixture of, first you have to figure out what's important to you and why. And then from that point, we'll dive into the numbers, help you figure out where you're starting from. A lot of people have only kept numbers in their head. And as we know, mental accounting is so much different than actual real accounting when you see what your real budget is. And so, yeah, I did have that benefit of coming in as a complete outsider and not having any expectation of what quote unquote should be or how things should be done.
Which is actually a really good thing. I like the fact that you haven't had the experience that many of us had, which was, we went to planning conferences, said we wanted to work with younger clients, and we just got bashed by older advisors saying, oh, young people will never pay for financial planning. You can't do comprehensive financial planning for young people. I don't even want to imagine the conversation when you say, I'm not going to do financial planning. I'm going to do more life coaching, cash flow analysis. We're going to focus on that. And they're going to say, I imagine most advisors think that must be pro bono or some, nonprofit financial literacy program. And it's opening this entirely new door, this entirely new business line that can be wildly profitable. And I'm super excited to see more companies like yours get started and be profitable, to be able to show that we can do different types of financial planning for different people and create businesses that are real businesses that are not just a hobby and not just a nonprofit.
Yeah, that's a big pushback I got when I was shifting into the industry. July or so of 2015, I just reached out to as many people as possible. That's originally how I got connected with you. Like, I just shot you an email like, hey, your name came up. This XYPN is a thing. Like, hey, I want to talk to you. And did that in New York and then on a national scale. And I got a lot of pushback of people saying the model that I had in mind, even though it hadn't taken a tangible form yet, like, you can't make money off of that. And how are people who have negative cash flow going to pay for your services? And this comes down to a larger question that I think doesn't just affect me, but affects financial planners as well, is by helping people identify that you can create value for them. I have people pay an upfront fee that we can go into my fee structure later if you'd like, but it is just saying, look, here is what you want. Here is what is possible, and I can help you by doing X, Y, and Z to get you there. Is that worth it to you? And A, is it worth this amount of money? And also saying, well, also look at the alternative. How much would it cost for you to not do these things, to not achieve these goals, to not make progress? And they're like, that is worth $1,500 for me so that I am able to have this life vision that we just painted.
So you haven't heard the episode yet because it's going to go live. We're recording a couple weeks out. So an episode that will go live before this one that has been recorded already is actually Kitsis and I talking about pricing your services. And one of the ways that we talk about is value-based price. So instead of saying like, oh, you make $1,000, so I'll charge you $10. It's that I can save you. The value I'm providing you is however much, and therefore you're going to pay me less than that. So I'm going to make you $10,000 of value. So therefore you can pay me $1,500 for that service.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a phenomenal, we actually said there that, it's basically like the holy grail of pricing, because it's just, you have to be a really good salesperson, honestly, to be able to sell that to a client and to explain it.
Yeah, I think that's the huge part, is it's not just a selling thing. You don't have to be a great salesperson. You have to be an incredibly good listener. And you have to be confident in the value that you can provide as well. Because if you don't believe in the value that you provide, then you can't offer a value-based model, because you don't believe necessarily that maybe you can end up with a number that, oh, I can save someone $3,000, but you have to believe that what you're offering truly is worth that much. And that's sometimes the imposter syndrome comes into play in starting a new firm. Like, you have to get to that point as well. So it's not just about salesmanship. It's about listening and about believing in yourself that you are worth that as well. At least for people, who are starting their own firms and kind of new. That's what I found.
So not that I'm trying to breed too many competitors to your firm, but I will say that, and we'll dig into a little bit about how you get referrals. But, when I look at the XYPN Network, I think we're pushing 270 firms now and growing. There's, I don't know how many thousands of people in NAPFA. What we have are a lot of folks that are doing level 2 and above, comprehensive financial planning. And it's almost in many ways creating this demand for a service that you're meeting. And I don't think you actually went out and realized this was demand coming from financial planners. You saw it more from the consumer side, but going out and seeing, how many advisors out there are generating interest in what we do as financial planners. And then now we're kind of creating demand for your services. So talk a little bit about just kind of how you're positioning yourself with advisors to work with clients. I mean, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah. And I think the smart move for the next 270 or whatever planners that join XYPN would be to look at this level 1 planning. I subscribe to the blue ocean philosophy. So that idea that there are more people out there than I could ever hope to help. And if a lot of people are coming in at level 2 and creating demand for people that need level 1 help or people that I can serve, then they should probably be looking at also creating a service for that level 1. But maybe I'm just a little bit ahead of the curve, or that's something where, again, like you said, I saw the need just around me. And so I created a service towards that. And honestly, when starting out a business, it's really important to have cash flow, right? That's what I work with people with. And so I came from the perspective of, okay, if I need to be getting clients fairly quickly because I simply quit my job in one industry and had the hubris or ignorance or stupidity to say, all right, I'm going to go into this industry that I never worked in and start a career in a company here, there needs to be a pipeline of prospects and potential clients coming through. And I'd taken some coaching courses myself and realized that, if you're looking for prospects, they really need to have 4 different areas covered. They need to be willing to pay for help. They need to be able to pay for help. They need to know they need help and be actively looking for it as well. So I think on the podcast that you had with Chris GB, you guys talked about how having a presence on social media and building an email list is important, but it's much more of a long-term play. And I totally agree that that's something that you need to focus on. But in the short term, it was, okay, I need prospects that fit these kind of 4 things. Where could I get those people from? And I kind of realized through my conversations with people that financial planners were getting people coming to them that needed that level 1 help. Either they weren't able to help them, their business models weren't set up for it. They didn't want to focus on the more emotional side of things. And that's when I realized, okay, if I can just get my name out there to different financial planners and let them know that I exist, then I can have a flow of, because people are coming to them who are willing to pay, able to pay, and are looking for help. They just don't know where to direct them to. So that's when I realized that. I just said, okay, I need to connect with as many financial planners as I can, let them know that I exist. And also the benefit for the planners is that people will outgrow me. Like, they will grow from level 1 to level 2. And when they're ready for level 2, I then need to know people to send them to. So it's been great connecting with planners as well and learning about, okay, here's what Brittany Castro does, which is different than what Sophia Berra does, which is different than what Trace Tisler does. And so I now have a network of people who have their own niche. And again, this is why having your own niche is so important, is that I know now where to send people to who go through my program based on what I think would be best for them and who would be the best fit as a comprehensive planner for them.
I love it. So, if we go back in history of financial planning, we used to be just such a hyper-competitive environment. We would never refer between advisors. That just never happened. And then at some point, financial planners started realizing, okay, well, I do planning and some of these other people do investment management. So maybe we'll refer back and forth. And then now what we're starting to see is I really built my RIA practice. And we always recommend that folks that are building financial planning practices go to the advisors that have established practices and get referrals from them of people they don't want to work with because they don't provide the service model to work with them. So that was kind of my pitch was, hey, look, I'm providing comprehensive financial planning, but I'm doing it for young people. You don't. So send those prospects to me.
Right.
And by having 100, 150 clients or whatever these advisors had, they were basically creating, all of these people are hearing about them because they have this big brand and people are coming in. They don't have $1 million. So they refer them to Alan. Well, what happens whenever I build my brand and I have all these clients that I'm working with, and suddenly I have folks that have cash flow needs, really intense that maybe debt payoff needs or whatnot, kind of this level 1 planning that we're talking about that I don't necessarily focus on or have the capacity for. Now, suddenly those are hot prospects for you. And to the point that you're talking about, I always believed in looking for clients in places that they were, how do I say this appropriately? Be where prospects are looking for a financial planner. Don't go out and try to convince people they need your help.
Yes.
Convincing someone they need financial planning is challenging. It takes a lot of time, energy, effort. It's really hard. We all have those conversations with people that we meet and we go, I do financial planning. They're like, oh, tell me more. I didn't want to have that conversation. I wanted somebody to come in and go, I'm looking for a financial planner. Will you please work with me? So in this instance, you're doing the same thing. You're just doing it kind of in your business line, coming off of the advisors that are working with these younger clients. So long rant to basically say, I think it's brilliant that you're basically doing what I did. You're just doing it for a different target market and doing it probably even more effectively than I did. So,
and I think you need to focus at different stages on different approaches. So right in the beginning, when you need to get prospects who are willing to pay, able to pay, and are looking for help, like in the beginning, doing what you did and what I'm doing right now, I think is the most important thing, to get people in the pipeline and not having to convince them that they need our help. That's a losing short-term battle. But then also saying, right now I'm building up that pipeline, but also looking to the future and saying, okay, over the long term, I am going to need to sell a vision of like what I can help. It is going to need to focus a little bit more on not convincing people that they need my help, but showing what is possible by working with me or by approaching life in this way. And that's kind of where this road trip comes along. The name of my company is called Be Awesome, Not Broke. So I try to help show people like what an awesome life would look like for them, and then how to use money in a way that can actually move them towards that. And so for me, I think this trip is a way of testing, okay, if I'm telling people that they need to figure out what an awesome life looks like for them and I can help them financially get there, I need to figure out what an awesome life looks like for me and tell that story of how I'm trying to have more travel in my life, more connection, because those things are important to me. And this is something that is not a short-term play. But if I show people and tell the story of my road trip and why I'm going on it and what it's helping me discover, then I'm not convincing people by beating them over the head with a club and saying, you need my help. But I'm saying, look, by doing these things, by practicing what I preach, here's what I'm discovering about my own life. Here's what I'm finding out. And it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be pretty, but this is the work that needs to be done. And so this is kind of stage 2 on telling my story and helping say, by doing these things, here is what is possible. And that's by opening up my life and kind of living it. So, I think different things at different stages. And that's kind of where the road trip is coming in and why I'm ultimately doing it.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell clients that you're going to help them live their great life and then be miserable yourself. And have never actually, figured out for yourself what that life is. It just feels very inauthentic to me.
Yeah, as a parent, I'm sure you know the problem with like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yep.
People kids especially, can sense that immediately. And I think anyone can sense that immediately, where there's this disconnect between what you say and what you're actually living. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important to be authentic and to practice what you preach.
Oh man, there's nothing better than telling my 2-year-old, I'm your parent, so you have to. And he's like, no, I don't think so. So no, it's this interesting angle that I think advisors we've just missed out on as in just a whole for whatever reason, is that we tend to not hire our own financial planners. We tend to be stuck in an office kind of doing the 9 to 5 like we're supposed to. And yet we encourage our clients to do something very different. And especially with the XY Planning Network, in that, we are pushing the boundaries in so many different ways in terms of the types of clients we want to work with, our fee structure, being able to work virtually. I do think it's important that if we're going to do that, we're going to embrace this new business model, that our advisors embrace a lifestyle that's actually conducive to them. Now, that doesn't mean you can't work a 9 to 5 in an office if that's really what drives you. But I don't think I've ever met anybody that had a flexible lifestyle, flexible work, and said, you know what I really want? An office I have to go to 45 hours a week. That sounds like fun. Like, no one ever says that.
Yeah.
Never go to a networking event and people go, oh, your life sounds miserable. I'd much rather have my office job. That's just not the way it works. So I am thrilled that you're putting, I guess in many ways, you're putting your money where your mouth is, in that you're actually going to show, one, that you have a virtual lifestyle, that you can enjoy your own life. And maybe you find traveling sucks and you hate it, and you'll go do something else. And that's fine, but at least you tried, and you're not going to be sitting around wondering like, oh, I really wish I had done this when I was in my 20s or early 30s. I'm not sure how old you are. How old are you? I guess we could tell listeners.
Yeah, I am 30 years old.
Okay, so 30s.
Yeah.
You're not going to look back and go, gosh, I wish I had tried that. Whether you enjoy it and it's the best time of your life or it's, not all that fun and kind of miserable.
On a macro level, I think that idea is so important, is that it's not about doing it perfectly. It's about simply seeing what you may want, think you want, or know you want, and then trying it and seeing what happens. I already think that I'm going to struggle on this road trip, and it's going to be really hard to balance work and travel and life. Hashtag first world problems. I get it, but it's not going to be easy. But, I'm also going to have to define what is work. Is it getting new clients in the pipeline, connecting with financial planners? Is it simply telling my story? I think what work is defined as will change, but what's important is not getting it quote unquote right. And I think this is what holds a lot of people back from tackling their finances, whether it's the basics of budgeting, whether it's trying to find the quote unquote perfect investment, is this paralysis that happens from wanting to get it right versus, and this probably comes from me starting some businesses and then, understanding that you just try something, you figure out what works and what doesn't, then you iterate and you change and you try it again. Like shoot for 80% and then pivot and try it again. If you aim for perfection, you're always going to fail and you're never going to be able to learn. And so helping people understand, and this is, part of that road trip is, I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't need to. And just in the same sense, like you don't know how retirement's going to look like. You can plan for it, but a client actually told me this great quote. I think it's by Dwight D. Eisenhower of planning is everything and the plan is nothing. So it's about the process, right? Of looking and where you are, where you're at right now, where you want to be and what it might take to get there. But really a plan is simply a prediction of the future. And unless people have powers I don't know about and can predict the future like that, we just can't do it. So there's no point in even trying for perfection because that's never going to happen. So simply just try something, get some feedback, and then do it a little bit better next time.
So the argument that you're making, we all, as financial planners, we can preach the value of financial planning, right? We can come up with these great quotes to show the plan versus the planning and all of this stuff, right? But we so rarely make plans for ourselves. And so what you're advocating for is that the advisor sit down and actually make a plan for themselves, not just do it for their clients.
Absolutely. Whether you want to say it's screw it, just do it and do it yourself. Since we love quotes, there's a great one by Marie Forleo, which says clarity comes from action, not thought, where, figure out, sit down and take some time to think about what is important to you and what you want to be working towards. And then don't think about it too hard. Just literally go and do it. And that's the approach that I'm taking. And I think that with the type of clients that I work with as well is something that they really resonate with.
Yeah, going into action is one of the hardest pieces, honestly. You can sit around and plan all day. And like you said, you'll never actually come up with a final answer. And just like financial plans are never done. But what you're basically saying, again, is just sit down and make a plan for yourself. Figure out what you want out of life. And, and building a business, most of the time, I would argue, will support the life that you're trying to build. But you can build businesses in so many different ways. There's just so much you can do from the types of clients you work with and how you meet with those clients and where your employees are and how you hire them. And if you ever hire employees, what you outsource, what you keep in house, the type of services you provide. All of these things will be dependent upon what you want to do with your life. And so you've got to be able to answer that question, because if you don't, you end up doing what I did, which is you build a business around this, I guess more traditional viewpoint. And then suddenly you want to make a change and you actually kind of have to go through a process to do so instead of just doing it from the start.
Right. That idea of you're climbing up the ladder and then you finally get there and you realize it's against the wrong wall. And you're like, crap, maybe I should have taken some time in the beginning to get some perspective and see whether I was actually headed in the direction or going up the right ladder in the first place.
I love it. So I do want to circle back on one thing that we specifically, I guess, skipped over a little bit, which is your kind of overall service model. So you had this concept of, I want to help people, want to help my peers. I want to be able to do a little bit different type of planning than comprehensive financial planners are doing. I don't want to do investment management. So talk about your actual service model, how you charge, and the types of clients you're really trying to target with this service model.
Yeah, so the clients who I'm looking to target are people who generally make enough money to not be living month to month, but oftentimes feel like they are. Or, so that's probably 50%. And then the other half is people who make enough money to be able to be saving or to be putting money towards their goals, but aren't, because they just aren't aware of what those goals are. They aren't being intentional about their spending or saving. And so these are generally people who are in their late 20s or early to mid 30s on their second, third job or so. So they're making decent money. I have clients who make anywhere from $50,000 to $170,000. And it's saying, okay, again, what they all have in common is just not putting enough money away, having negative cash flow, or having debts that they need to be able to pay back. And so the way that I work with them is over more of a intense. So I know with financial planners, it's generally a couple upfront meetings, maybe 3 or 4, and then a meeting every quarter is what I think it was, or what I've heard a lot of people have it set up that way. And what my model is I work with people, I meet with them 6 times over the first 3 months, and then 3 times over the subsequent 3 months. So it's 9 times in the first 6 months. And then that's really our, kind of period of engagement is that 6-month period. And then at that point, they're automatically, as I like to call it, enrolled in month to month, kind of like the retainer model that you guys have, that XYPN has. But they can cancel it at any time. So trying to say in this 6-month period that here is what I'm going to walk you through. Here is my process. Here's where I hope to get you, kind of getting you to the point where ideally you know how to fish and you can do this on your own. But people work at different speeds. Some people, even though they get the basics down, they say, you know what, I honestly still would love help and have some coaching, because a lot of times it's not just about the money. Like I have a guy who we worked with together. He went away for a couple of months and then he came back and said, honestly, I just know that I need a coach. I want someone, like I was helping him with nutrition. I was helping him with a morning routine. I was helping him with like setting up his budget and using YNAB. You need a budget for the budgeting portion. But because my mantra is like, it's not about the money. Money is just a tool that you use to live the life that you want. He realized that he needed support in more of the quote unquote life coaching aspects of what I was doing. And that almost is more of what I see clients coming back for than just the help with like the cash flow management and budgeting and the numbers side.
Yeah. Cause I mean, all of the information for anything that we do, anything we learn about in the CFP, you can find on Google, right? I mean, we don't really, although we have to be experts in all these various topics, it's not necessarily about expertise in content. It's about behavioral management with clients. And there is no area greater and more challenging to do, behavioral management is around cash flow. Whenever you have to tell a client that, okay, we have to stop spending money on things that you think are really enjoyable, but they aren't, right? We've all had those conversations and they kind of suck, which is why I honestly didn't work with clients that had cash flow needs, because I hated the conversations that I had to do. But I'm glad that there were people out there like you that actually enjoy those conversations and do them a lot more effectively than I ever did.
It's honestly about framing it, because even the language that you use there is, hey, you're spending money in here and you can't or you shouldn't. The way I approach it is saying, hey, in the first couple of meetings, we home in on what is important to them. So is it family? Is it travel? Is it paying down this debt? Whatever it is, really identifying what it is that they really want to work towards and then having them come up with it. And so as long as they are it's almost like Inception, right? As long as they're the one that comes up with the idea, then moving forward, it's not me telling them that they can or can't or should or shouldn't spend money on something. All I simply do is hold a mirror up and say, here is what you told me. You told me that X, Y, and Z are really important to you. And now that we look at your budget, here's what I'm seeing is that you're spending money on ABC. So I don't have to tell them that they should or shouldn't or can or can't. I just hold up that mirror and then they say, oh, yeah, like what really is important to me are X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to put money towards these things. And it is more of an empowering moment than a disempowering moment. Because a lot of times people see budgets as restrictive When if you do a like values-based budgeting and build it around what is important to them and their goals, then it's actually them proactively putting money towards the things that really matter. So it's shifting that conversation and that mindset, which I think really has been helpful.
Makes sense. All right. So how do you charge? So this is a pretty intensive service if you're doing 9 meetings over 6 months. So what is your fee structure in order to actually get compensated for this service?
Man, this has changed so much over time. And of course, over time is relative. It's been 8 months since I had my first client. So there's been a lot of change in figuring that out. But, when I started out, it was like $500 and it was originally for 6 meetings over 3 months. And that was because I didn't trust in my value and I had imposter syndrome up the wazoo. And from there, it was okay. Charging more, and 500 became 750, and 750 became 1,000, and 1,000 became 1,250, and even as I got up to 1,500, one thing that I realized was that people could 1,500 was kind of what I'd settled at for a while, and that was a stretch for some, but for those who were making a lot of money, it was not enough money, oddly enough. So what I found, and I see this a lot in coaching, is that people have to feel, and I don't mean pain in a negative way, but for me to take something seriously, and I think for others to take things seriously, is you have to feel some kind of like financial hit to take it seriously. This is why exchanging of services, if you say, oh, hey, web guy, you can build my website and I'll help you with financial planning. A lot of times that doesn't work, or in my experience, that also hasn't worked because you aren't really valuing the other person's time until you put money down. I saw this a lot in the music business where, hey, if you record my album, I'll do X for you, or because musicians always, quote unquote, don't have money. And the implicit acknowledgement in that conversation is that I don't value what you do. Because you can come up with money for rent, you can come up with money for food, but I can't come up with money for you to do my website. At the end of the day, it's saying, I don't value what you are doing as much as I do these other things.
It really is the perception of value in price. And we know it exists. It is a behavioral bias that people have. But, how much is something that's free worth? Not a lot. And suddenly you have people pay for it. And suddenly it feels like it's worth more. I remember Carl Richards telling me that when he doubled his speaking fee to try to get speaking engagements, the number of engagement offers that he got doubled. So he doubled the same presentation and suddenly the offers started rolling in. And it really is because people see you and you're like, oh, he must be really good because he raised his fees. Again, if you undercharge, honestly, if you charge too little, then people are wondering like, oh, I guess he may not be all that good if he's charging so little. There is a perception that, the more you charge, the better you are at doing what you do. So you started at $500. Where did you actually end up then with that service?
So ended up at, right now, it is 1.5% of their income. And that is for an individual, gross income for an individual. And then if they're married, then it's for both of them for that 6-month period with a $1,500 floor.
Minimum $1,500. And then, so do they pay it all up front or do they pay it over the 6-month period?
It depends. So some people pay it up front, and there have been people that have paid $2,500 right up front. And then there have been some where they say, I really, really want this. I just honestly can't afford to put that much money down up front. So what can we do? And that enables me to have a conversation of saying, yeah, I really want to work with you too. And if I truly do, then saying, okay, how can we make it work for you? Like, let's go through and let's look at what you can do and what will work. And then if I want to work with that client, it's absolutely then just not a conversation of if, it's how. And so anywhere from upfront to 3 months to 6 months payment plan.
Okay. And so, but then you said you do work with clients after that. So how do you charge them after kind of that initial 6-month period to work with you on an ongoing basis?
Yes. So the way that works is it was a fixed number as well. It was like $100. And then I just said, okay, you know what? It's going to be 0.1% of your income every month.
So 0.1%. So that's basically 1.2% over the course of the year.
Correct.
Okay. That makes sense. So if they're making $100,000, that's $1,200 for the year. So it's $100 a month. Do you have a floor on that?
Yeah. So the floor is $100.
Okay. So, basically $100,000, it sounds like it's kind of the cutoff in terms of income on where, you hit these floors that you've set in terms of like 1.5% of income, $1,500 and all that sort of thing. Obviously, somebody making 75,000 can still work with you. They'll just hit that floor.
Correct.
And honestly, this actually works in, Kitsis and I did a mailbag episode not too many episodes ago where one of our members, Marcio, had actually said that this 1% to 2% of income is his sweet spot as well, where he just says, over 2%, people start getting really squirmy about the numbers just because it feels really expensive. Less than 1% is just super easy to sell. So somewhere between 1 and 2 works for him. And it sounds like that is where you're finding your kind of sweet spot as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when we go over people's budgets and start looking at the numbers, when they see what are the things they're spending money on and how much of a percentage of their overall income those things are, it does actually put it into perspective how little that costs for them. Again, if I'm trying to teach them how to fish, and this is something they can take with them over the long term, like how valuable and how actually cost effective it is over the long term if they get to the point where they can do this on their own.
Makes sense. So then I did notice that you also have a group option. So one, kind of what is the theory behind doing group coaching? And two, have you had any actual success with that yet? Because I think it's a really interesting model that has a ton of potential.
Yeah, so that's something that's actually very, very new. I'm in the middle of my first group program, actually on the 5th meeting out of 6 I have later today. So it's something that's very new, but I've done multiple group coaching programs outside of a financial capacity. So I have paid for coaching programs that have happened in a group setting, and I found them to be incredibly helpful. So I thought that it would be a great approach to try with money as well, but also understanding that, money, people are very oftentimes hesitant to share their own figures and how much they're making and really dive into it because of all of the issues of like our self-worth is tied to our net worth and things like that. So it's been really interesting. And I've had some great experiences so far in the course and some things I've really learned from it as well, which is it's really important who you get into the course. I'm kind of doing a beta this time. So the 2 people that I have in it, keeping it really small, already know each other. So that was helpful from a level of trust. I think the group, it's really important to set and create the environment that you want. So setting the expectation that, hey, we're here to learn from each other. And that's, I think, the people that do best in a group setting are those who understand that concept and are willing to share and understand the value of being in a group because they can learn from others' experience. And so really the biggest and most important thing with the group is the people and setting a space where they feel that they can share and be heard and have this really comfortable space to be able to share something that is really, really, really intimate. Because again, how you spend your money is a reflection of what's important to you, whether you're doing it consciously or subconsciously. So creating a space where there's no judgment, people feel free to share and help others.
I think it's an example of just so many new possibilities that technology has brought us, that creative thinkers, in terms of just having financial planners that are willing to do things just a little bit different, just to think outside the box. And it's not just one-on-one planning sitting across from your mahogany table inside your fancy office. Like, just the thought of meeting virtually has blown the advisory world's mind collectively. It seems, much less this thought of like, what if we do group coaching, similar to how personal trainers, you can go one-on-one, you can go in groups. I prefer working out in groups. That's why I do CrossFit. I love groups. I don't go one-on-one. I don't go by myself. There are the DIYers out there that go by themselves. How do we serve them? They're the people that like groups. How do we serve them? There's courses, there's group coaching, there's models that we haven't even conceptualized yet that we're finally starting to experiment with. And will it be mainstream? I don't know, but I don't see why not. No one's looking at the exercise community and going, I can't believe they don't all hire their own personal trainer. Like, why is it okay there and not okay over here? I don't know. It's just interesting how long it's taking, but I'm excited that it is finally kind of becoming something that we're trying, because somebody's going to figure out how to do this appropriately. And it's going to have such dramatic effect because it can reach so many more people than we can as advisors.
And that's a big thing. Also, I know that people within the XYPN community are figuring out and trying to answer the question of how do I scale, right? That there's a limit of how many people you can help when you're doing one-on-one coaching. So whether it's Mary Beth in writing a book or Sophia Berra starting her new class on retirement, or right, it's figuring out how do I leverage my time so that I can help more people. And also like a group course, yeah, it's $750. And so it's half as much as what I would get for the floor of working with someone one-on-one. But if I can create a structure where I can help 4 people or 6 people at a time, then that's $3,000 or $4,500. And the more people I get into a group, up until a certain amount, of course, like they have a better experience because they're learning from more people's collective experience. And then I'm just scaling how many people I can help. I'm scaling it from the income perspective. So it's actually a win-win if you're right, it can be done correctly.
Yeah. And like I said, I see huge potential with it. I mean, and we've seen some group coaching style programs like Dave Ramsey. I mean, they take 1,000 people through at one time. So there's no reason to say it can't be done. That doesn't stop people from saying it can't be done. But, I don't see any reason why we should be feeling that way. I think it is just kind of figuring out I think the challenge always comes back to marketing and distribution. It's ultimately, how do we get folks to sign on? How do we let enough people know so that we can get 10 people into a group and take them through? Because it's been the nice part, I guess, about only needing 100 clients to be a successful practice is you only had to go find 100 clients. When you set up a model like the Robo-Advisors or LearnVest or some of these other systems that require 1 million clients, well, you got to go find 1 million clients.
Yeah.
Marketing and distribution has always been the challenge. Kind of that cost per client conversion is huge to consider. So as we're kind of closing this episode out, I know I mentioned it earlier in the episode that you actually wrote an article for the XYPN Network blog, which is kind of what prompted me to reach out to you. You had been on my list. I have a very long list of folks that want to chat with, and this bumped you to the top. And that was actually on kind of your 5-step process to convert prospects into leads, which is really your sales process. So we'll link to it in the show notes, but also you can go to xyplannetwork.com/convert-prospects, or just search Garrett on xyplannetwork.com and it will pop up. But, it sounds like, I guess folks can go here to actually read through all the various pieces that you talk about, but where did you kind of learn sales? I mean, where did you learn to implement a sales pipeline like this? Was it something you just came up with and it's been working? Is it something that you learned? Kind of where did, I guess, this education come from?
The School of Hard Knocks, to be honest. In addition to doing accounting for the 2 music business companies that I started with those friends, I was the client services and business development guy. So my job was to go out and build relationships with music publishers, with record companies, with managers, and in our second company, with advertising agencies and with marketers. And so what I was forced to do was kind of what I didn't want to do in my financial coaching business, is convince people that they needed what we did. And so that was kind of how I was approaching it, and realized the limitation of that, how it's not helpful to have to go out and try to convince people that they should work with you. But that's where I really cut my teeth in how to build relationships with people over the long term. That's where I got a lot of my project management and CRM software. So building in the structure, kind of in the processes, that's where I learned a lot of that. And then also just how to present yourself in a way that is valuable to the person on the other end. That is a really, really important piece. There's another quote, remember, because we love quotes. You can have everything in life that you want if you just help other people get what they want. And that's kind of the underlying theme. I think that quote's by Zig Ziglar. And that's an underlying theme in this article, is to convert more prospects into clients. It's not really about what you know or what you want. You can have all of the expertise in the world, but if you don't listen and understand what the person on the other end of the phone or the video line truly wants, then it doesn't matter how good you are. You just aren't going to connect with that person and their needs and their wants and their deepest desires of what they want out of life. And then there's no way you're going to convert them, no matter how much expertise, how many years you've been in the business, or how many fancy tools that you can use.
Isn't it amazing that we actually work in jobs that allow us to say that we get to help people discover their deepest and their most intimate desires out of life, and then actually help them achieve it? It's what makes our profession so amazing. And I'm not sure that very many people still understand just how powerful of relationships and that we have with our clients and just how much amazing work we really do get to do and how rewarding it is.
It's why I got out of the music business and why I decided to start this one. And, it's why I wrote that post of, it comes across that idea of, hey, you should convert more prospects into clients. It comes across as kind of silly. But I think what's great about financial planning or financial coaching, whatever stage you're working at, is that truly is our end goal. It is to help more people. So if you truly believe that what you are doing is helping someone, then you deserve to figure out how you can do something like convert more prospects into clients, because then you're ultimately helping more people. That's what it is. So the greater of a reach that I can have, greater of the conversions that I can have, then I'm ultimately helping more people discover what an awesome life for them looks like and then helping them live it. And that's one of the, honestly, the greatest things that I've found about this job and this profession is connecting with people who truly believe that. And I think that's why I was so drawn into, connecting with people in the XYPN. It's just that that's where people come from. It's not about the sales portion. Actually, they're so worried about selling almost to a fault that they won't talk about all the goodness that they can provide and the transformation they can help create. It's just that it's so client focused and focused on helping people. Like, that's why I think this is one of the coolest professions out there. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir, but that is our end goal. Like, how cool is that?
I love it.
And why it's so important to be really good at this stuff so that you can, whether it's through group coaching, whether it's through courses, you can expand your reach, help more people, and change the world. Nothing big, but just that, that's what we're shooting for.
Just change a few hundred lives out there. And this is honestly, we're bringing in Nancy Blakey, my sales coach who we've had on the show. She's actually going to be at the conference.
Oh, yeah. That was a great episode.
Awesome. Because she's going to be at the conference. She has 2 back-to-back sessions. So she's on stage for 2.5 hours, I think, in our sales and marketing track, talking about this kind of relationship sales of, how do you sell what you do really? I mean, it doesn't have to be sleazy and it doesn't have to be, Northwestern Mutual style. We don't have kill rates in our business like they do in other dark alleys of our industry. We don't have to talk about those sorts of things, but how do we sell what we do in an effective way? So I guess as we're closing out, I'll ask you my famous ending question to all, a few thousand listeners that we have on a regular basis. And that is, if you could go back and tell a younger Garrett, maybe this is Garrett that was thinking about starting his own firm or was maybe even in the music industry, kind of looking at the various career paths that you had. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing, kind of the one thing you wish you had known then that you know now, what do you think that one thing would be?
I would go about 9 months ago. So before my first client, but after I'd started Be Awesome Not Broke. And I would simply remind myself at all times that it is not about me. It's about the client or the prospect, about what they need. So when I was starting out, as I still am pretty new, I'm often worried, okay, am I going to get enough clients this month? Am I going to make enough money to cover my expenses this month? Am I? And it's very self-focused. And I find that whenever I get out of that conversation and just say, okay, how can I help my existing clients? What can I do for them? If I'm on a prospect call, what exactly can I do that will help this person? Whether or not it directly means money in my pocket if I convert them at this moment. It always seems to work out if I put my attention onto them. So I think what I would do is either print up a lot of t-shirts that say, think about them, not yourself. I would get that tattooed on my forehead or pay someone on Fiverr to text me it every hour of the day. Just that idea of think of others and think about what they need. Again, you can have everything in life that you want if you just help other people get what they want. So stay focused on other people, on what they need and helping them and being of service. And then in the end, it may take a little longer than I want, but it will all come back to me and it'll work out.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. This was an awesome conversation. I just love hearing about new business models and new ways of helping clients, because honestly, I think this is the future of how the direction financial planning is going. So it's so awesome to be able to chat with you kind of early on in the process. And we may look back in 5 or 10 years and go, yep, I had Garrett on as this was being created and here we are today. So thank you for taking the time.
Of course. And thank you so much for having me on. And I can only hope in 5-10 years that, we get to be laughing and looking back. And as I have helped change the world again, looking at it, just aiming small.
Hopefully so. Well, thanks again.
Of course. Take care, Alan.
I truly believe Garrett's onto something here, and it will become so much more commonplace to see financial coaching and financial coaches just kind of getting in this level 1 planning area that he's really working in. And I think it's going to create a lot of amazing clients for CFPs looking to do more comprehensive work. Garrett's model stands to help a lot of people, and I'm really excited to see what his future looks like. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.